Good afternoon, everyone. So today we are beginning a new Mishnah, Mishnah 5. This Mishnah is from Rabbi Chanina ben Chinai. A little hard to pronounce his name. This is his father's name. Rabbi Chanina also was one of the 10 martyrs, and that was killed by the Romans. And he is especially known for his legendary Torah study, and also very, very special person in terms of his miracles, but really just in terms of his dedication. Um, he said three things. I'm going to put it on the screen for us. Hang on a sec. Here we go. So Rabbi Chanina ben Chachinai Omer, he said, Haneor balayla, someone who is awake at night. V'hamahalech baderech yechidi, someone who travels alone on the road. V'hamafane libo levatala, and someone who, here it says, leaves his heart open to idleness. Hamafane is kind of like he turns his heart to idleness. Harei ze mischaye benafsho, this person is liable for his life or for his soul. Here it says, bears the guilt for his own soul. And each one of these is according to some, it's three separate things. Some say it's only two different things, and there's some that go together. But the idea of haneor balayla, someone who stays awake at night. So obviously, there's different aspects to staying awake at night. Depends on what you're doing with your time. But certainly if you're wasting your time at night, then you're not accomplishing anything. Interestingly, Rabbi Yehuda tells us, the Gemara talks about what's the purpose of night, right? Hashem didn't need to create the world in day and night. By creating day and night, creates a distinction, right? And also we know that creating the aspect of day and night separately creates a way sort of regulating a person, because we know that when it's much harder, especially if you live in one of those places where it's 24 hours of daylight or 24 hours of night, it's much more difficult. And in fact, there's also studies that when they created the light bulb, right, and then they started the 24-hour shifts, etc., it made changes in people's lifestyles. So there is an importance to the regulation of having day versus night. And what night does is it gives us some downtime, right? It creates the opportunity for things to be different. So the Gemara talks about, one opinion says that night was created for sleeping. That's the reason why we have the concept of night, is so people should go to sleep. Another opinion says actually that night was created for learning, for learning Torah. In fact, in the Gemara, it brings down that Rav Shlokish says that the moon, to have the light of the moon at night, was so that people can learn Torah at night, to have the light of the moon to learn by. And another commentary points out that we have a difference between the summer and the winter, right? We know that the winter is a very long night, the summer is a shorter night. So during the winter, when it's a longer night, also that then the nighttime is more suited for learning Torah. There is a concept in general of nighttime being special for learning. Obviously, in the winter, when the nights are very long, you have a lot of time. Again, back in the days before you had electricity, the nighttime pretty much meant the end of your workday, right? Your people couldn't do the same amount of work at night as we do now. So naturally there was a change, and you had the time to study. So that's one aspect of the night. Another aspect of night, in terms of what's the problem with night? So the Rav Bartanura points out that the night there's a time for what we call mazikim. It's sort of like there's danger out there. There's somehow built into the system of the world. Hashem put in certain times of danger, and that exists at night, not necessarily during the day. That natural danger. Traveling alone, on the other hand, according to the Rav, the danger there is from someone robbing you, right? It was dangerous to drive, especially again in the old days when you didn't have a car and you were in a horse and buggy or whatever you were riding. You were out there on your own, and you were susceptible to robbers, especially if you were traveling alone, and especially if it was at night, but even during the day. On the other hand, someone who is learning Torah during those times, that's a protection. There's a protection from the mitzvah of learning Torah. The Rabbeinu Yonah points out that when a person is traveling or at night, those are actually special times that a person has a greater ability to connect to Hashem, to connect to God, because generally nighttime is quieter. There's less distractions, right? When you have a family, the kids are asleep, the younger ones are asleep, right? Things like that. If you don't, certainly you don't have the distractions of the workday and outside forces. Person's traveling, right? If you're familiar, you're especially if you're traveling alone, for sure, you're alone with your thoughts. But even if you're with other people, sometimes, if you have a long trip, how much conversation can you have after the first 3 hours? You ran out of things to say. So there's an ability to contemplate and to think when you're traveling that you don't have necessarily when you're busy with other things. And says that Rabbi Yonah says that that's a time to connect to Hashem, and therefore it's time you can think about think about Torah. And therefore, if you're using that time, if you're wasting that time, so then you've cost yourself the precious time, and you've not even lost the time. You could have used it for something else. Interestingly, the Meiri, and I believe the Rambam also says that the concept of night, because the Mishnah says Hanei or Balaylo, someone who is awake at night. So one angle we just said was being awake at night and wasting your time, but also being awake in general is a person needs sleep. And there's a lot of, I just came across something, actually, Lauren just sent me something about, the amount of hours you need for sleeping, right? So many studies tell you need 7 or 8 hours sleep. And Meiri, going back to, not sure what year it was, but we're talking, he's a Rishon, so we're talking in the 1300, something in that range. He said you need 8 hours sleep. Rambam also said you need a lot of sleep for your average person. So 8 hours sleep, it means out of 24 hours, right? It's a lot of sleep. On the other hand, it keeps you healthy, right? The idea of getting enough sleep means that you will have a healthy body and a healthy mind. And during the time that you are awake, you'll be much more efficient, right? When you're tired, you not only can't you move as well, you also can't think as well. And therefore, a person who gets enough sleep is going to be much more efficient during his waking hours. And the Meiri is telling us that's the protection, that if a person is going to sleep at night, then it's going to protect their health, and that's the greatest protection. The Maharal also points out that the concept of traveling alone or staying up to and wasting your time is things that are risking your life. And Hashem has built-in system to protect us from danger, and says these things of someone who is traveling alone, someone who is staying up, and someone who is thinking about basically wasting his time when he has free time, those are sort of putting yourself outside those natural protections that Hashem has set up. And again, he says night is for sleeping and learning, and the sleep is going to protect you, or the Torah study. So there are even earning a living, someone who goes to work, that protects you also, because you need to do that. It's something that you're not just doing it because you're having fun, but you're doing it as a necessity of life and a necessity of creating a life that is going to be used to do mitzvahs as well, right? We need to make a living in order to be able to do the things that we are supposed to be doing. And then it says technically, right, anytime we do a mitzvah, doing a mitzvah is a protection. And the Gemara tells us that someone who's on a mission doing a mitzvah, there's a protection, right? And that's why we have the concept of what we call a shliach mitzvah, right? Many times you may be familiar, someone goes on a trip, especially when they're going to Israel, you give them a few dollars and you say, give it for tzedakah in Israel when you get there, right? And what the concept of that is not just that you're giving the tzedakah, but you're appointing this person as your messenger to do the mitzvah of giving tzedakah, and therefore it provides a protection in his travels, that while the whole time that he's traveling there, he is a messenger, he is a shliach for doing that mitzvah, and that's a form of protection. And so we have that idea of a person who's traveling will have their protection when they're doing it to do a mitzvah. So even this idea we said traveling alone. So if you're traveling alone, or even if you're traveling with a group, when you're traveling and you are going to make it into something more, then that creates the protection. So studying Torah on the way, or by the way, you shouldn't be reading a book while you're or reading the Torah while you are traveling. And there's an interesting thing that once if you're driving, not to get into too deep of type of learning. Well, it's, people listen to things and all that, but don't do it in something that's going to take away your concentration from the driving. That's important as well. But the overall concept, especially if you're not the driver, is that there is a protection from performing the mitzvah and from learning the Torah while you are traveling. We'll have to